Hello and welcome to the Generation Zennial podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Keith. Alongside with me is Vinnie, one of my friends from college. And we created this new podcast, the Generation Zennial podcast, to talk about our viewpoints coming from the Zennial generation. That is that very sliver of time. We're at the end of Generation X, but before the dreaded millennials. So we have the old school mentality of Gen Xers, but we have grown up with technology our entire lives, immersed in pop culture. And that's what we want to talk about is our experience and how we see the world today and how we can make a change for the world to be better. And Vinny, let's hear some about yourself as well.
Yeah, hey Keith, how you doing? It's good to start this podcast with you. I think this is going to be a very interesting experience for the both of us. I like I like your intro about what the zillennial means. That like you said, that small time frame there, where I think we have an interesting viewpoint of the world as far as how technology has affected our lives. A little background on me: I am an athletic trainer, which is basically someone who does sports medicine. Currently unemployed right now because sports are kind of on the downturn because of the coronavirus. But I am also a professional wrestling referee. I've been doing that now for 17 years on the independent level. So I have a little bit of background in that when we'll be talking about wrestling in the podcast a little bit later. Um, but yeah, it's good to be here. Should be a fun experience for the both of us. Just sit here and talk about what's going on in the world, and like I said, hopefully the listeners will like it.
And yeah, and I should say that I am not a wrestling referee, but I have seen you work in person, and I'm also a wrestling fan as well. And I currently work as a studio engineer for a university and also teach media production. It's what I do. I'm married to a physical therapist, so I'm all aware of the athletic training perspectives of things and that line of science as well. And thankfully, I am still employed because we did not, my part end of the university did not get canned, although our entire athletic communication department did get canned, unfortunately, during this pandemic, because, like you said, sports are not happening, and that's affecting a lot of us.
Yeah, my wife is a math teacher for a local high school, so she has a teaching background. So we kind of have similar but different like spouse occupations as well.
we both run parallel in
Like
opposite ways.
she's a teacher, you're a teacher. You don't teach the same things. I'm in sports medicine. Your wife's in physical medicine, but we don't do the same things. So,
Yeah, like I
but
said,
so it's like
parallel but same.
similar but different. It's it's an interesting thing. So we have some topics we're going to touch on for this edition of Generation Zillennial. That's another thing we differ on. I pronounce Zillennial. You pronounce it
Zennial,
Zennial. So whatever you like, write in. Write
tomato,
your comment.
tomato. Yeah, where's the?
Write
Let's
your
get the votes.
comments. We want to see how we're going to pronounce Generation Zillennial or Generation Zennial. So yeah, we have a few topics that we're going to touch on today. So let's get started.
So I just want to note we are recording this on October 9th. So it is a couple days after the debate. The dust has settled. The fly is home with his family now after surviving Mike Pence's hair. The vice president, the vice presidential debate. What are your first thoughts about that?
Well, it definitely wasn't as exciting as the um, presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Not that that was to be expected, right? Mike Pence is, he's a classic, I shouldn't say he's a classic politician, but he's definitely more of a classic politician than Donald Trump is. He basically avoided questions that he didn't want to answer, and when he couldn't answer a question, he attacked his opponent, which is, what you do in these debates.
Right.
Kamala Harris, I thought did a decent job. She's kind of at a disadvantage sometimes, I think, being a black woman, because people don't perceive black women as someone that can be as authoritarian as like a Mike Pence can. So I think people kind of push back on her for being abrasive. I've seen that being said. That's a bit ridiculous when you compare him to compare her to what Donald Trump did a week before. But that's kind of what you have to deal with sometimes. And I thought she did a decent job.
Well, I think that goes, to go off your comment about Kamala Harris, there's prevailing It's not just her. It's prevailing always against, whenever a woman is assertive in the same way that a man is assertive, then they're portrayed in an ugly light.
Yeah.
If a man is assertive, oh, they're assertive. They know what they want. If a woman is assertive, oh, they're not to be trifled with. They're very mean. It's a very big double standard in our society where a man can go out there and act and bang on the bully pulpit all he wants, and people praise that. And then if a woman does the exact same thing, says the exact same words, they're considered threatening, and and people are like, oh, well, she must be that time of the month kind of statements and things like that. And like just yesterday morning, he called her a monster. Trump referred to Kamala Harris as the monster on the stage. And listening to NPR Politics talking about it, these are terms that he only uses against women. Calling another woman a dog, calling her a monster. It's very much demeaning, and it is a very much sexist approach to it. And I think, for my take, Kamala did a great job of writing that line of like, I'm going to be assertive without, crossing that line. So no, she didn't give anyone fuel to stoke that fire.
Well,
She held herself back as much as possible. And she's a seasoned attorney. She knows how to do that kind of stuff. And I think she did a great job at it.
Yeah, well, here's the problem with conservatives in general is that it doesn't matter what she actually does or tries to hold back. And this is where liberals tend to fail, is that they do hold back. They want to play by the rules. They want to, present themselves, and it doesn't matter because conservatives are just going to attack them anyway. So,
right.
I would have loved to see her come out and just been like, will you answer a question? Like, get after Biden a little more. But like you said, coming, from a woman point of view, they aren't viewed the same as a man would be on that stage. And I think that's doubly so for a black woman. I think Obama had a lot of those same problems being a black man, that he couldn't come off and as tough and abrasive as he sometimes should have been.
Because then he would have been uppity.
Right. And then you get the double standard where you're either going to be called an uppity or derogatory for being angry, basically, or you're going to seem weak. Right. So you can't win. But yeah, Kamala did, push that line a little bit. A lot of people just like to little, I'm speaking now, like that type of language was kind of effective. But at the same time, like I would have loved to see her push back a little bit harder on Mike Pence's just evading questions left and right. Because I was just watching the debate, rewatching it again, and he really just, every time he didn't want to answer a question, would just talk about the American people, or talk about how Biden wants to raise taxes on everybody. Or one of my least favorite parts of the debate was definitely when they both went on about how much they love fracking, because apparently they both love fracking. So
well, I mean, I go back to your first thing that you said there about the American people. Like, that was the first thing my wife and I were like, we're asking a question about Trump's response. It wasn't about the American people's response. This has nothing, like, yes, the American people are doing a great job, but it's not our job to lead. And the question, it wasn't about what the American people are doing. It's about what the presidency and the White House and the leadership is doing for the pandemic.
Right, but he couldn't answer that.
Yeah, it's like, and it was just like, well, we're going to get through this because the American people are strong. Thank you for props. I appreciate that. But what are you doing to help me? That's the question.
Well, he can't answer it, right? He literally can't.
He can't, because they're not doing.
He doesn't have an answer.
As one meme put it, like, here we are 6 months into a pandemic, and the leader of the task force is behind two layers of plexiglass. Like, the optics of that, right. Like he's the quote unquote leader of the pandemic task force, and we had to put precautions in place because you failed.
That was that was a move by the Democrats. That was a move by the Democrats. I think that was a move by the campaign.
Although the way the plexiglass,
I'm not sure if that plexiglass didn't actually
exactly. I was like, it's more theater. It's a farce.
Political theater.
It is political theater. It's like you want to do something, have fans that are blowing it away from each person. Because you have
right.
You have fans that blow it off to the side of the stage instead of at each other or whatever it is. Or you have the air filters there but make them visible. If you really want to do that kind of thing and make it known that you're doing it, put the air filters out there. Or here's my question. You had a plexiglass between the two candidates, but what about the moderator? There's nothing protecting the
Yeah.
moderator at all.
I mean, she's pretty far away. She's pretty far away, but
yeah, but there's been studies that show 15 feet is possible. And you're talking about sitting there for an hour and a half and they're spewing, their nonsense. It's particles are going to travel, and she's within that range of like, if I sit there long enough, this is not a good position to be in. Luckily, it's a big open air space, so hopefully the ventilation, the HVAC system is strong enough to cycle that air through and nothing comes of it. But that's where I look at.
You also got to remember that Mike Pence is definitely, he's definitely possibly, like, that's a word, God. But he was, he was in close proximity to a lot of people who have tested positive for coronavirus lately.
Well, I think that is the latest thing, is that he's canceled an event for today or this weekend. He's not traveling. So why wouldn't he travel all of a sudden? That's kind of a red flag. I mean, I know people are like zooming in, like, look, oh, he's got pink eye. I'm like, I don't want to be like super, like, I want to step back. I don't want to be the person like, I'm going to turn to every single
thing. To QAnon, right? The left QAnon.
Even ABC was doing it. We watched on ABC, and they were zooming in on Mike Pence's eyes and showing how bloodshot they were. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe he took a little cocaine beforehand. I don't know. I don't know what he does.
That's probably more possible. I mean,
he did a little blow. I mean, now we just started the rumor mill. Mike Pence does blow.
Pump himself up for the debate.
Maybe he's part of a fight club that we don't know about. I don't know. Wouldn't that be interesting? Pence is actually part of a fight club.
I would like to see that, actually. That's
Mike Pence fight club.
I'm on top. I'm on board for that. That's
all in on.
That's something I would like to see. I want to actually be the first guy to fight. I'll jump in the ring.
You might also be the last guy.
I will fight Mike Pence. He might be a really good fighter. I might get my ass kicked, but
that's true. He's like that guy in the martial arts movies that doesn't fight the entire movie until the end, and all of a sudden someone tries to take him out and he just like demolishes him with like one finger.
One finger. Knocks
my
soul out.
Oh, he does the 5-finger punch, and you take 5 steps and you die.
Done. Yeah, it could happen. I'd take that chance.
Little Kill Bill reference there. Any chance I get for references, I will take it. I mean, there is one question that neither one of them answered, and is the transfer of power question, about, have you talked with the president or the candidate about, like, if they become ill, whatever. I mean, I get why they didn't answer, because it's a weird thing to have to answer. First of all, there are provisions within the Constitution that cover that kind of thing.
I thought it was a weird question. Like, what do you?
It was a weird question. Yeah, it's totally like where I don't know where I'm going with this.
Do you walk up to Joe Biden and say, "Joe, I know you might die.
Just think, you're 78. I know you're old.
So what? Anything you want me to do if you die? Like, I don't. What are you doing there? Like,
it's a weird question. There's a whole process that's already laid out in our documentation that takes care of that. I mean, historically speaking, there are several presidents, if you look back in history, that hid illnesses from the public and everything. For most of them were benign, though. I forgot where I watched it, but they put a whole supercut of all these together. Kennedy, start with Reagan. He lost a lot more blood and was a lot more in danger of dying after being shot than they let on initially. Kennedy apparently was on a cocktail of medications because he had a disease that he didn't admit to having, and it was the only way he was able to function. Obviously, everyone knows FDR was in a wheelchair, but that didn't affect his mental capacity. Just at the time, you didn't want to show him in a wheelchair because they wanted to portray him as weak. And there was actually, the Secret Service used to go up to photographers and take their camera and take the film out of the cameras if they saw him in the wheelchair.
I believe that.
It's something you could not do today because it'd be instantly on Facebook as soon as you take the picture.
Right.
I think
you have to develop this stuff.
I think the most devastating one in our history is Woodrow Wilson, because he had a stroke that was never talked about. They hid him. He was hidden in the White House. His wife was practically running the country for almost a year and a half. And I made the argument the other day that because of that, we have, because Woodrow Wilson had a stroke, he did not take part in the peace talks after World War I. And going into that beforehand, he was staunchly against punishing Germany in the way that the rest of Europe wanted to punish Germany. And because he wasn't there to have a voice at the table, because he had the Spanish flu, he had suffered a stroke, he's not the same person anymore, and he wasn't there and he wasn't strong enough to do it. Europe now punches Germany, and look what happened 2 decades later.
Is Woodrow Wilson's stroke responsible for World War II?
That's my
That's the hot take.
That's my hot take.
That is a spicy take, Keith.
One thing can change in history, and a lot of things happen, especially when you're talking about a leader of a nation that makes a decision that can have repercussions for decades to come, years to come, centuries to come. Totally. I know we totally got off topic on that, but it's been on my head all week. I don't know why.
That's what we're here for, though. We're here to talk about what's on our minds, and spread our message. And like I said, and hopefully people like our message.
I hope so.
Listen.
Is the Zennial viewpoint? We are definitely, I don't know.
How great would it be if we got to the point where we had like people calling in?
Well, we have
talking to us. That's I think that's my goal.
Oh man, Collins, whew, we got to screen those babies. Might get some QAnon people coming in. I'm like,
let them all in. We'll be the free marketplace of ideas.
Well, we have a mute button, so it's okay.
That is true.
Speaking of mute buttons,
we can always drop people.
Speaking of mute buttons, let's talk about the possibly maybe not happening next presidential debate.
Let's Trump is like,
this is all Trump and COVID.
I can't do it virtually. I don't know why I can't do it virtually. I really don't understand his reasoning on that. Other than the fact that he thinks he won't do as well virtually.
Well, he doesn't want. I heard a clip of it saying it. This was from Fox Business yesterday, talking about. I think it was Business. It's one of the Fox shows. He called into like 5,000 of them. Because he's obviously sick at home, so he can't do anything else. So he's just watching Fox and calling in when he wants to talk about something. And Fox just says, "Okay, here's the microphone. You can talk and say whatever you want."
Well, let's be honest. Like I think if any network, it's like the president's on the phone and wants to talk, and be like, "But I'm on,"
But also, most presidents have enough of a staff around them to say, "No, that's a bad idea."
Oh yeah, no. Trump doesn't listen to it. Trump doesn't listen to ideas. I think we know that.
No, he just has yes men around him, and if you don't agree with him, he gets rid of you.
Well, you get fired. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, you're fired. So Trump, the Commission for Elections, which is a nonpartisan commission. I want to reiterate that they're nonpartisan. So it's not Democrat or Republican that's making this decision. It's a commission that's been around for decades. Was going to convert what was already set to be a town hall debate, because that's always the second one's usually a town hall debate, was going to be virtual. They're going to be in their own separate locations, and then there was going to be an audience in another location with the moderator to ask the questions. And I think this is what happened. This is my theory, is that Trump wakes up in the morning, turns on Fox News, sees what that was, and immediately gets his speed dial out and calls them in. And is like, I'm not going to do this. How terrible is this? But then there is a quote that he doesn't want them to have the mute button. He doesn't want to be shut up. He wants to be able to control the conversation.
It's easier to be muted virtually than it is if they were
right. And even if you were in the town, so even if you were in the same location, remember last town hall where he was creepily standing behind Hillary Clinton as she's speaking.
Yes.
Those optics are just they're burned in my brain. And even if you're in the same location, just because you mute a person doesn't mean you're not still a disruption. If you have two people in the same location, especially town hall, they're down low, people are up in bleachers around, and it's not a large room, relatively speaking. And generally speaking, if you have a good voice, you can, if you weren't broadcasting it, you could talk to those people without any amplification or minimal amplification.
Yeah.
So just because his microphone is muted, we at home might not be hearing everything, but it doesn't mean the people in there aren't hearing it. Doesn't mean it's not distracting towards the other candidate. So Biden might be talking and Trump's over here off camera, but he's still saying things and he can be heard by Biden, by the people inside, and it's still a distraction.
I mean, Trump's still loud. Joe Biden's mic will probably pick it up.
That too, depending on how you have the mic set up.
You'll hear Trump in the background just like, "No, you're going to raise taxes on everybody and ban fracking and the economy and the swine flu."
Oh God, the swine flu. Oh my God, the swine flu thing.
Yes,
That was like an apples and oranges example.
yes. If the swine flu was as deadly, well, it's not as deadly. That's why they didn't treat it the same way. We didn't need to shut everyone down because the swine flu doesn't kill as many people as the coronavirus does.
Yeah, let's not forget when Ebola was a thing. The Obama administration was, highly criticized by the right for when one doctor came back and they said you have to isolate for 2 weeks, and they put this person in a bubble, like literally an isolation room, and it was a big deal. Like, oh, how dare you do this? And it was one person that was in the Ebola hot zone in Africa, and as they came back, they said you need to isolate, and the Obama administration was, heavily criticized at the time for that, even by the person that was being isolated. And now you're skipping back to an earlier epidemic with the H1N1 and saying, oh, what a horrible job you did. All these people were infected. Yeah, they were infected, but how many people died? It was, like you said, it was nowhere nearly as deadly as COVID is.
Right. It's not as deadly as a disease. You don't have to take the same
Right.
precautions. Like, yeah, you should try not to get the swine flu.
Right.
It's be better off if you didn't have the swine flu. But I mean, how many people were infected by the swine flu? Totally, like 60 million or something like that.
Yeah, it was a lot. 60,
Yeah,
70 million, I think they said.
but the deaths nowhere
But
equal
like
what we have
15,000
here.
people, right? I think it was like
Yeah,
15,000 or less.
yeah. I mean,
Actually, my
right
neighbor's
now we're looking
son
at what
had it.
20 over 200,000
Yeah.
people dead right now from the coronavirus.
What was it 212? I think was the last number I saw. And it's constantly rising every single day. I mean,
Yeah,
Connecticut, we were doing great in Connecticut handling cases, and in the last month I've seen hospitalizations double again. We were down to 50 hospitalizations. We were down to 50 people in the hospital, and now we're back up to like 120 as of this morning.
yeah. It's that second wave. Once things start to reopen, it seems like cases start to go back up. It's happening in Europe right now. It's happening across the country here. New York is starting to see a little bit of an increase. You're starting to open schools back up. Restaurants are starting to get a little bit more crowded, and you're seeing increases. I think I Governor Cuomo, I have a lot to say about. He's not my favorite governor in the world, but I think he's done a decent job handling the coronavirus. I know a lot of people are upset about his shutdowns and his being tough on restaurants and bars, and his rules about if you can go out to eat, but you can't go out and hang out and have drinks. But he's listening to the science, and the science says that the coronavirus gets spread when you hang around in a place for a long period of time. And
Right.
if you're sitting around in a bar drinking, that's what you're hanging around for a long period of time. If you go out to dinner, you go out, you get something to eat, you leave.
Right.
Right. It's a lot easier to be separate from people. It's a lot less social, right? You're just with a small group of people, and you're not, it's reducing the spread, and that's.
But even that, what you think about most restaurants that you go to, think about, low ceilings and, tight areas. Just because you're at your own table doesn't mean you're not mixing those air particles with people around you, which is what always concerns me. It's like if you bring restaurants up to 50 or even 75% capacity, that's a lot of breathing that's going on. And when you're eating, you're not wearing your mask. So there's a lot
Right.
of stuff going around. And I don't think all these restaurants went around and retrofitted their HVAC systems to have UV filters in them and things like that. So it kind of scares me. Like we're in Connecticut about to hit phase 3 reopening, which means, venues and things like that are going to be open at a certain capacity. And I am honestly concerned, especially because we're also entering the fall at the same time that phase 3 is opening. So you're going to a season where you have the flu season coming up, and we're opening more people, letting more people in, and people, they see that the problem is we have a large part of the population, I think, sees reopening. Oh, for reopening, it's not as big of a threat anymore, and they let their guard down. They're more laxed about it. And maybe they don't care about their mask as much, or they're going to be a little closer. They're doing more touching with each other than they should be doing, and then that's where I get concerned. It's like, okay, now just because we're opening more doesn't mean all the other precautions just drop away all of a sudden. And I don't know. I still have no desire to go out to a restaurant and eat. I say this all the time because it has right now it has no appeal to me, because I don't feel safe in it.
Yeah, I mean, and I can't blame you for that. I think you got to still think of it as it's still a virus, right? It's still there's still ways to transmit it. There's still ways to protect yourself. So you got to the risk is always there, but at the same time, you need to realize that as long as you are staying away from people, not having people breathe on you, not making sure you wash your hands properly, making sure your hand sanitizing, making sure that if
Hmm.
you're in public, you're not touching your face or your mouth. Those type of things, and you should be safe. Like, I don't want to say it shouldn't be cause for alarm because it does seem like it's very easily spread, but at the
Hmm.
same time, it's still a virus. The thing with the coronavirus I'm finding is that the people are taking it either not serious enough or way too seriously.
Agreed.
So and where do you and I'm a health professional, right? I'm an athletic trainer, so my my thinking is err on the side of caution. So I'm not going to blame people for like saying that they don't want to be in crowded places, right? That makes a ton of sense because if you're gonna, always err on the side of caution is basically what I'm trying to say.
I agree with you 100%, especially because, if you're uncomfortable with it and then you go out, try to go into that situation, now you're not only are you uncomfortable, now your anxiety is up, because you're thinking about too many things. And it's just, if you're in that situation, what, it's not the time to go and test your anxiety level. It's not worth it to me, for that either, mental health wise.
Right.
You got to keep your mental health. It's just as important as your physical health. And I don't know. I see people struggle with it. We struggle with where the line is all the time as well. We want to have, kids over to play, but we want to keep them outside because we want the kids to play because we don't want them to like go a whole year with not having interaction with other kids, because that's bad for your mental health. So where do you draw that line, and where is it acceptable here and not acceptable there? Um, it's it and it's an ever moving line. I feel like with just with even with our own family, because sometimes this is okay, but that's not okay, and well then we have a debate. Well, why was that okay and this not okay?
Right.
Um,
And it's
and it
important to
becomes a
find those
discussion.
distinctions. And also, it also depends on the places where you live, right? If you live in a crowded city,
Right.
there's you're there's going to be more likely chance that you've been exposed to it because just the more people that are you're around, the more people that, that are going to have it. It's just the way math works,
What, math?
right?
What are you, Andrew Yang? How
I liked
dare
his
you?
hats. I did like his hats. I didn't love everything that Andrew Yang was saying, but I did like his hats. His Make America Think Hard. I think the math hats. That
Was
was
it? Yeah. Oh, was that
that
what
was
math
that
stands
was
for?
good.
Make America Think Hard. I didn't realize that. Actually, he
I
made
think
it
so.
into an acronym.
If I remember
I,
if I remember that correctly, yeah.
what's crazy is that, during the debates when he was on the stage, everyone had an American flag pin. He had a math pin, and he never got. No one ever brought that up in any. I think he maybe for conservative media, he was so low on the totem pole, it wasn't even
No one
worth
cared,
trying to
right?
attack him. But it's like it stuck out to me like, oh, he's got the math pin. Oh, speaking of American flags, I had this thought during the vice presidential debates. Go back a segment here, because I always see like during primary debates, right? There's always this stuff going around Facebook of like how, oh, look at the Democrats, they hate America, they don't have any American flags on the stage, and then you go to like the Republican debates and there's like a zillion American flags everywhere to show how patriotic they are. And then I was watching the we turn on the presidential debate and then the VP debate. I'm like, there's not a single American flag on the stage. This is a nonpartisan group that put this together, and there's no American flag. And I'm like, where's the outrage?
That's
Like,
something I didn't even notice.
well, exactly, because it's not the stage itself. It's got the Constitution in the background on the text,
I
and
did
it's
notice
got
that
it's red,
actually.
white, and blue. But that's the official presidential debate stage.
Right.
But the fact that like during primaries they always want to throw stones like, oh, look at this, and then you have the presidential debate and there's the president's on stage, but there's no mention about how there's no American flags.
Well, that's always the knock from conservatives to
Yeah.
on liberals
Oh
is
yeah, no, it kills me.
liberals hate America.
The double standard kills me. It's like, oh, the whole stage is red, white, and blue, but because there wasn't an actual flag there, it's a problem.
See,
And
and
I don't
the
get
thing
it.
is, liberals don't hate America. There are a lot of
No,
leftists. There are a lot of leftists that hate America
I like America.
for for decent reasons. So that there are a lot of leftists that hate America, and they don't even hate America, right? They hate
the systems within America.
They hate the systems within America. They hate the American ideal that has just been so whitewashed over the past 250 years, where like we don't even recognize our own history of like what we did. Like places like Canada seem to do a lot better job, and they have their issues as well, but they seem to do a lot better job of being like, sorry Indigenous people, like sorry we murdered all of you, like sorry about that. They seem to do a much better job of at least acknowledging that, maybe not doing anything about it. But that's the liberal way, isn't it? Though, is to acknowledge the things that the mistakes that we've made in the past. No, we might not be able to do anything about it, but we're going to acknowledge it. Whereas like leftists are like, no, we want to do something about it. We think that all this, we think that there is systemic change is needed. Right? Well, it's easy for me to say.
Systemic. There we go. I mean, yeah, with it, when we talk about that, first of all, I think about, Germany does a great job about acknowledging the horrors of World War II. They have placards around the entire country that, show the atrocities that where things happen, but they don't memorialize it, but they educate. So there is an acknowledgement of their past there. I mean, that's more.
Whereas conservatives would be like, why are you tearing down statues of Hitler? We need to remember our history.
Yeah, if you tear down a statue, we're going to forget. I'm like, no,
we're going to forget about our history. That debate was weird, man.
Statues are monuments to an icon. You put a statue up, you are praising that person.
Yes, it's like you said, it's a monument. You're right. It's something that you're celebrating.
It's called a monument for a reason, right?
Right. You're celebrating it. It's not just there to be like, oh, this is our museum. Like, no, it's not. It's a statue. It's not the same. Like,
but I mean, when you talk about our past in America, and I think it varies greatly based on where you grow up and where you get your education from too. Because, growing up, I know in elementary school we did, in fourth grade we did. I think from fourth grade through high school, I know learning several times about the Holocaust and all these things. We watched Escape from Sobibor when I was in fourth grade, which is a very graphic movie about the Holocaust. So that was ingrained in my brain very early on. In fifth grade, we did the entire half the year was about the history of slavery in America. So things like that were definitely known, and we talked about them. I do think that even still, though, things like the Trail of Tears, it was talked about. We talked about, but I just don't think.
And the gravity of the situation.
Exactly, the gravity. Yeah,
even with slavery, when we learned about it, I mean, you can argue like what age do you want to talk about this kind of stuff? I would argue that you want to talk about it at a very young age, so you got to
repeat it.
You get the understanding of it. I mean, people don't give little kids enough credit for like being able to understand things when you actually discuss them and talk to them.
Right.
With them. Like it's the same argument conservatives have about things like homosexuality. How can I explain that to my kid? You explain it to him.
You say, oh, well, this man and that loves that man.
Gender is a social construct. Done. Like, if you just started out as a kid, like, gender doesn't exist. It's not. It's made up. They would understand it a lot easier than these, like, these boomers. Sorry, boomers. I don't think any boomers are going to listen to this, but what was I just to say? These boomers who are like, they're trying to change what men and women are, and it's like,
no,
what?
We're not. We're acknowledging what's been the truth for all of history.
Right. Trans people have existed for the entire history.
Trans people, homosexuality.
Right.
I mean, and it's scientifically known that some people are just born without definitive genitalia. And
that's a whole other.
And in those cases, like when they're born, the doctor goes, "Which one do you want?" And then they construct either a vagina or a penis. Like that's what happens. And so people might get a constructed sex organ in one way, but they identify differently because their hormones are different on the inside. But because of our AB construct of society, you have to make a choice. Whereas like nature doesn't make that choice. It's, as Jurassic Park says, nature finds a way.
Nature finds a way.
You don't have to have, nature will find a way. You take away all of one gender, nature will find a way to reproduce. It's going to happen. It's not like everyone just stops existing all of a sudden. There's
Right. Well,
actually,
that's
I forget what species it is. There's a species that changes gender on a regular basis.
there are plenty of, I think,
Yeah, where they go from
definitely
producing
fish.
eggs or producing sperm. You know,
There are
so
definitely, I think there are definitely a good number of species of fish, I think, that do that.
right,
But regardless, like gender isn't the same as sex, and that's what I think a lot of people fail to understand. They're so hung up on this. Men have penises, females have vaginas, and that's it. That they can't accept the fact that
right.
a woman can have a penis. And when you get past that, and it kind of seems silly, but if you just get past worrying about what people's genitals are, these kind of issues just go away. There's not
Right.
It's not an issue anymore.
And when you get past the fact that it doesn't affect your personal life, what that person over there does,
no whatsoever,
is even better. It's like, you know what, you can disagree with their life choices. You can disagree. It can be uncomfortable. I think we talked about this last time a little bit too. You know, you can be uncomfortable with it. That's fine. Like, you don't have to fully accept them as, I don't accept every single neighbor because we don't agree on everything. It's just reality. You don't like everybody. You can't accept.
but you believe they exist.
Right. Exactly.
you acknowledge their existence and that they exist.
And you know what? If they have to use the bathroom, they can use the bathroom.
They can use whatever bathroom they want.
Exactly. If I ever opened up any sort of retail space or restaurant or anything, I would just have gender neutral bathrooms throughout, because it just makes life easier. You don't have to have like, this is the man's bathroom and this is the female bathroom. Just, this is the bathroom. Go use it.
It's a bathroom.
Yeah. Actually, I heard a great story recently. By the way, we've totally blown off following subjects that we predetermined.
I know. This is what happens in our free flowing conversation.
I don't care, because this is how my brain works anyways. I teach class like this sometimes too. But we have they're talking about redesigning. It was an engineering podcast, and they were talking about redesigning public restrooms to be gender neutral, and basically having a restroom being like 3 different areas. You have your wash area, you have like your dressing area, and you have your doing your business area, and and the rooms open into each other, but they're not all one big room. And so everything always accommodates for privacy wherever you are, but everyone is allowed in. So it's not a men's room, woman's room, cross gender room. It's just a restroom in a public building that has an open door. You come in and you go through one of these 3 phases based on what your needs are, and everything is accessible for handicapped individuals, seeing impaired individuals, whatever gender you identify with. Everything is equal, and it becomes more of a communal space. And the part of the problem that they're running into is really there are statutes and states that require by law what kind of restrooms and how you put them in place. So there's this group, and I wish I remember the name of the group right now. They're actively trying to change legislation. Ugh, such hard words to say.
That wasn't even that bad. I think.
Thank you. Legislation in states to modify the building code so that they can start building these things. So they've designed these beautiful these bathroom facilities, restrooms, whatever you want to call them. And they want to start putting them in places. By the way, one thing that can happen now, and I think should happen, I've heard this as well. We need music in restrooms.
Yeah.
When you walk into a restroom and it's like completely silent, but there's like 4 guys in there, but no one's talking, and 2 people are taking a dump. And it's just
that's always the most uncomfortable thing, isn't it?
Can we just get some music playing in here?
Yeah, you have to make a number 2. Are we should we curse? I don't like. I haven't decided. Like, should we try to keep this PG, or just like, can I say curse?
I don't know. Andrew Yang curses on his podcast, so.
Well, Andrew Yang.
Shit. Whatever.
I think okay. So when here's
my feeling about cursing.
And you're in the bathroom alone, like that's and someone walks in, it's so uncomfortable. I don't know why. It shouldn't be, right?
No, it shouldn't be, especially if you have to do it too, right? I always say, if I know the person who's next to me based on the sneakers they wear, so like, should I say hi to them? But so
I don't want to be
cursing real
talked to
quick.
when I'm taking a shit, but okay.
Right.
Just,
But
just
with cursing though, this is my viewpoint on cursing. Cursing is allowed as long as it's relevant to what you're saying. Like cursing for sake of cursing, like people that just like vulgar because they want to be vulgar. Like vulgar
Oh yeah,
to me,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
just cursing because it's like shock value. I'm like, I find no interest in that. But if it's
I
like
just didn't know if you just
relative
said
to
it
like
for,
how you're saying,
well,
and you know,
for,
it's a context. You know, I had
we're
a
gonna get
growing
censored.
up.
I don't know.
Hey, my priest growing up, he one time gave a homily. Father Maynard, God rest his soul, said, you know, shit's not a bad word. This is during a homily. He goes, shit's not a bad word. You know, if you see dog shit on the ground, it's dog shit. It's all about context of how you say it.
Good for him.
I was like, that is, you know, and then like it's always stuck in my head. It's like it's about context. If you say a word in context, it's a valid word. If you don't, it's not valid. All right,
Well, I mean,
I'm going to go back on the story train here.
I don't necessarily believe in curse words, but yeah, we can maybe we have a whole conversation about what curse words are and like why they're silly.
I feel like I want to have a little
never
history lined up. I'm going to have some facts lined up before we get to that one. That'd be
do
fun.
some
Some
prep
like,
work.
you know, some etymology on like where the not no, that's wrong. Sorry, that's study of insects. No, it's etymology. No, I can't think of the study of words now. Whatever.
Yeah,
Epidemiology. There you go. Is it that? I don't know.
Yeah, we're gonna change our name to the Big Word Podcast.
Nice. Because I would be fun.
Joe
to have,
Rogan
like,
doesn't use words like this on his podcast, does he? I don't know.
He has better guests though.
Definitely, yeah. Maybe we'll get Bernie Sanders on our podcast one day.
That's right. Hey Bernie, you want to be on a podcast?
Maybe he would. He seems like the kind of guy to be like, you know, we got 10 listens last week. Like, do you want to be on our podcast? Be like, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Hey, we're
if we got Bernie Sanders, we'd have a lot more than 10 listens. I'll tell you that.
That's damn straight. Well, you know what? I think after we get a couple under our belt, we start calling in guests and see what happens.
Yeah,
because we can totally have guests on this.
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
We just talked for an hour about nothing, basically. So
what is this? It's the Seinfeld podcast. All right, so here's a subject that you want to talk about because it is Halloween. So let's talk about some 80s horror films. We are again of the Zennial generation, so this is when we grew up. This is our formative years of film, and you know, honestly, I think my first idea of a horror film might have been when I saw the heart being taken out during Raiders of the Lost Ark. But even though it's not a horror film, it's still a pretty graphic.
That's a pretty terrifying moment for. And that was the 80s, and that was the 80s for us, wasn't it? It was like there was no holding back. There was no like. I don't know about your parents, but my parents were like, as long if it's on TV and it's on cable, it's probably fine.
Mine might have been a little different. My mom definitely did not want me watching MTV for the longest time.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I was not a censored child. I could basically watch whatever I wanted to, and we did have like the premium movie channels, the HBO and Showtime and Cinemax as well.
We didn't. So, we had to go to my friend's house for HBO.
I might have had to sneak some of those programs that I watched, but I definitely grew up watching basically whatever I wanted. But that was the 80s.
So if 80s horror films, what sticks out in your head as like the pinnacle 80s horror film?
Well, the 80s was great. It's a great time for slashers, wasn't it? It was like coming out of the 70s or Friday the 13th and
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street, of course, came out. I think that
Freddy Krueger, man.
That was a little bit later in the early 80s, I believe. But
I think I just was Freddy Krueger one year for Halloween.
Really?
I think in fourth grade I did.
I remember having the glove for some reason. Maybe
right?
I did too. I definitely had the glove.
Where I made a glove once with butter knives.
No, I had the plastic knockoff thing.
And the sweat.
Yeah. So what's your favorite horror movie, especially from the 80s?
I didn't want to tell you this beforehand. I actually am I'm not a huge horror movie person. I like 80s stuff. More recent stuff, I should say. I don't like. It depends because I have this debate with my other friend all the time about horror films. I'm like, it depends on the genre of horror. Because when you talk about horror films, there's genres within genres of horror films. So like, like the first Saw movie, I love the first Saw movie. I know this is not 80s, but like the later Saw movies, I'm like, now you're just being ridiculous. You're just coming up with more and more ways to kill people that have no idea, nothing to do with like a plot.
Yeah.
It's like the plot is razor thin and it goes on.
The plot became secondary.
I was definitely more of a Nightmare on Elm Street guy.
Yes.
growing up. I would say, those,
as
I
was
didn't
I.
watch them all, but like I definitely like the Freddy Krueger thing, like because oh, he got burned as a child and he's all disfigured, and then he only haunts you in your dreams. So I was like, that's just a really cool concept of for storytelling. Like, oh, don't fall asleep because then you're gonna get caught, and like then they had to figure out how in my dreams can I fight back at them, and like plan how to sleep and all that stuff. So it was a cool concept like that.
Well, I always think horror films are interesting, especially I'd love to get your opinion as someone who works in film and teaches film study. Um, because horror movies need to be made on such a low budget, right? And
Right.
that's the whole model behind horror movies is we'll make this movie for super cheap, and hopefully enough people go to see it. We'll make our money back, and that was definitely the model behind the 80s slasher movies. And my favorite horror movies from the 80s, especially, is Hellraiser.
Oh yeah, see, Hellraiser was good.
Hellraiser is really good. It's not as
Pinhead.
it's not as you watch the movie. It's not a super like you don't see jump scares. It might be like one or two, but it's very it's psychological. It's gore. It has a good amount of gore in it, where it's like that body horror that's always interesting. But it's just a story that kind of like grabs you, right? It's a story about this kid who's mom turns into a killer to resurrect her uncle who they were having an affair, or at least once. But I mean, that's a pretty neat story. Then the just like any other horror movie, this as the sequels go on, it gets more ridiculous because now, at this point you're just like, we need to make money off this thing somehow.
Right.
We don't have any ideas. Let's just throw these people out there and like people will watch it.
Well, yeah, just keep going back to the well and see what they can do. I
Right.
mean, so I think you mentioned it there. You hit the nail on the head. The What makes a good horror movie, and really what makes a good any movie, is you have to have a good story at the heart of it. If you don't have a good story, you don't have anything. And horror movie is really just a thriller with more gore.
Yeah,
It's the
that's
context. It's we got someone killing you in your dreams, whatever. Now it's a horror movie more than just a thriller. So I think that's
the
but
more
it's
you
the
show,
storyline.
the more you actually show the murder. This is what
Yeah,
differentiates between a thriller and a horror. Like,
but I mean, like even still, even good horror movies don't show everything. Like, especially you talk about the low budget. You have to be careful what you show and what you don't show, because if you try to show everything and you can't do it based on your budget because you can't show that kind of scene because you can't make a convincing looking brain, then you kind of lose it. It's like, and then you become cheesy. So like you got to ride that line of how much do I show and how much do I not, because of where my budget is and what I can physically do on screen. And you talk about the 80s, that's all practical effects. There's no
and
CGI.
they're so much better.
Well, I totally
I don't think
totally agree
anyone can
with you.
argue like how much better the practical effects were than the CGI. And then when it got to the point where it was like it was just easier to do CGI and not it wasn't as cost prohibitive.
Right.
And then you got bad CGI, which made it even worse.
Oh, see, that's the problem. You get bad CGI, and you go backwards in technology, and it's just good CGI is good. It has a place. Sci-fi films definitely benefit from CGI for their space battles and all those things. Although I still
You
appreciate
couldn't have the
practical
Marvel
effects.
movies now. You couldn't have Marvel movies
Oh yeah,
without the
stuff like that.
CGI.
Definitely. Lord of the Rings was probably the pinnacle of the start of the good CGI movement as far as that goes. But I mean, going back to horror films, yeah, I think about going before the 80s now, things like Psycho, you don't see the murder happen. You see the knife, you see the woman, you
Right.
hear the scream, and then you see the knife hitting the shadow. You don't see the actual murder. You don't need to actually show everything for
Well,
it to be awesome.
that was
That's Hitchcock.
Hitchcock's.
Oh yeah,
That was
obviously.
what was the line about suspense in Hitchcock about the bomb?
Oh, it's about building suspense through imagery. You show a briefcase with a bomb, then you show a clock, then you show a person, then you go back to the briefcase, and you go back to the clock. And if you keep cutting these back in a certain rhythm, you create the suspense of, oh, this person's near that bomb that's going to go off. They don't have to physically be anywhere near each other, but because you're showing them sequence to each other, you're showing a bomb with a clock with a person. You see these things. Same thing. The other example was if you show a baby, and then you show um I forgot the baby example. I'm thinking of, there's another example. It's like if you show a picture of oh man, now I can't think of the examples. This is more of like you go back to like the Russian filmmaking where if you show one picture and then you show, you show a picture of like a cereal bowl, right? And then you go to a person's face. Now there's the same person every time. You ask, what is the person thinking? Oh, they're hungry. Now you show a picture of a woman lying on a bed. And you go back to the same person's face. What was this person thinking? Lust. The person's face never exchanged, but because of the image you saw beforehand, you infer what they're thinking.
You're changing the context. Yes.
Yeah, and that goes back to the Russian montage scenario that predates Hitchcock, which is where he gets his ideas from. So, and then which brings us to horror film. You show things in sequence, and it creates an image in our head of what's going to happen, and that creates even more suspense in it. So I think this is, and I will defend this as a horror thriller film, even though it's a sci-fi. Alien.
Oh, Alien's that's a horror movie.
And that's probably where I gravitate more towards, because like I'm a big sci-fi fan, and now you have a horror element in sci-fi. You have an alien running around the ship, killing people off one by one. That's where I'm at.
Aliens is essentially a slasher flick, but because it had such a sci-fi background, it got labeled as a sci-fi thriller or whatever.
But now that's a different one though. He had the budget.
Yeah, that too. That helps.
So he has a budget to make it. But interesting story about that. So they built this whole set. Beautiful set designers make all this stuff, but then he dimly lights everything. And I forget if it was the producer or somebody else was like, "What are you doing? We made this set and you can't see it all." I was like, "I know."
I think I've heard that actually. I think
it's like it's supposed to be. It's a spaceship. You don't, it's not a Kubrick film. It's a horror film. So well, 2001: Space Odyssey. I'd claim that as a horror film too.
Was
that the 80s? That was before 80s though. Sorry,
that was definitely before 80s, but that's still a hot take.
Because that predates Star Wars.
2001 is a horror film.
Yeah. Well, again, you have
it's definitely suspenseful. Yeah.
Well, you have a antagonist that's killing off the crew one by one. That's kind of like every single horror film. Well, every slasher film you have, Chainsaw Massacre, whatever it is, they're killing off everyone one by one in a different situation.
Yeah.
So it becomes a sci-fi film because of location.
Right. 2001's a horror film. All right. I think that's
a hot take. It's my hot takes.
It's Keith's hot takes. I like it. So let's talk about the ultimate low budget horror movie. That's Evil Dead.
Well, the 80s, I guess.
What do you know about that?
Evil Dead. It's so bad. It's great.
It is, and it's also great. It's so bad. Like,
that's a movie. Bruce Campbell is amazing.
But that's a movie you watch and you just think like you can see the limitations that they had and you see how they worked around them, and you can literally just watch the movie and kind of get a feel for how the movie was made, as well as like enjoying the movie, which I think is really interesting.
And I think what makes also that a success is, first of all, Bruce Campbell himself. But when you lean into it, so if you have a limitation on budget and it's going to be somewhat cheesy, if you lean into that, it makes it better. Like if you try to make, like you have a limitation budget and your props are going to look cheesy, but we're going to try to make it serious. That's where I think you would fail.
Right. So you're right. It almost leans into that parody.
Right.
Angle, right. It's almost a parody where it's not, but it's the fact that you had to take these almost like all these tropes and shove them into a movie.
Yeah. It's the same way Adam West leaned into the, cut that out. Jeez.
Sorry. I need a cough button.
It's the same way Adam West leaned into the Batman role in the Batman TV series, because it was a very campy series. It was like, well, if it's going to be campy, let's make it campy.
Super campy.
And it works that way because they decided to lean into it. So with Bruce Campbell and the Evil Dead series, because they leaned into it, like, let's just go for cheese. It works. And I love the fact that because of that, Bruce Campbell becomes like the B star that, like, in the backgrounds of movies, when they're showing a B movie, it's just like Bruce Campbell doing something on the TV.
Always.
And it's just like, right? It's so great. It's like, hey,
well, I think Sam Raimi just inspired so many directors that like to pay homage to him. It's like, That's what you do, right? You put your favorite director's movie in the background of your movie. That's
But
how we.
it wouldn't even be that movie though. It would just be Bruce Campbell. They would
Oh,
just
just in
film Bruce
something,
Campbell
right?
doing something random, but because you saw Bruce Campbell on the TV in some sort of context, you just knew it was like some B movie. So they wouldn't have to pay for the rights for the movie. They would just hire Bruce Campbell to film for a day.
So you're
To do
saying
something.
not even like showing like clips of the Evil Dead or like
No, it would just be
you're
Bruce
just like
Campbell,
get Bruce
like
Campbell
close up of Bruce
to be in a
Campbell.
background of a movie.
Yes.
Just because it's like you know who that is. So I
Because
see that's
everyone knows,
something I
because you
know.
know who it is. It's he's probably the biggest B-list star there is.
Yes. I
He
cannot
should be
disagree with that.
A-list. Actually,
I think
did you watch the TV series when it came out 2 years
I
ago?
watched some of it.
I started watching. I never finished it.
Yeah, I think I watched maybe the first season,
It's like you can only
or
take
maybe it was the
camping so
second
far though.
season. I might have caught it in the second. I don't really remember exactly what I did. Watch a bunch of episodes. I thought it was a cool show. I thought it was really well done. I thought it
Yeah,
was like enough fan service to be like, remember this. This is interesting.
it was a great continuation.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of like meta comedy and like that's why like I like Community so much.
Oh man,
Because it's just I like to that's why I'm a big Deadpool fan as well. Like I like to explore the tropes of genres and like parody
what
them and kind of just
I think that goes back to
look
our
at them like that.
generation. It's just like our generation we're so media aware. I would say pop culture aware that when
Right.
we
Well,
have
that's
those
the thing.
references, it just falls. It calls to us.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. We grew up with the explosion of cable and the explosion of media, and we got to see as young adults with how the internet affected media and what like I don't know if anyone could have predicted like what media looks like now 20, 30 years ago,
No.
especially with the explosion of like YouTube and like all these YouTube stars.
Oh,
Like
the influencers on
the influencers.
Instagram.
I don't like that term influence. It's a weird term, but I do like I do watch a lot of YouTube. Like
Oh,
I don't watch a ton of TV anymore. I go and watch YouTube channels and about film reviews and about
I have YouTube clips that I show my classes for things because sometimes these people do such a great job on them. Like this is going to be part of my class now.
I mean, it should be. I mean, I'm surprised there aren't like there probably are somewhere, but I'm surprised there aren't more like YouTube classes, like how to make YouTube videos. And
so there's actually, well, first of all, there's a series I will promote at any moment I can. So PBS in conjunction with, I can't think of the name of it. I hate when this happens.
on the spot.
It is going to make me open up YouTube. Time out. Internet, come to my savior.
That's why you don't have to remember anything anymore either.
Oh, Crash Course. That's what it's called.
Crash Course.
Crash Course is a YouTube channel made in conjunction with PBS, and they have different topics. So I use the history of film one in class because they have like a 12 part series on the history of film, and they're all 10-minute episodes. They're they're fast. You have to actually pause them sometimes to read everything. I watched, it was a 40-part series on the history of the world. And they made another 40-part series on it again. Like there was another series they made, but they have the history of the US. They have science, chemistry, media literacy. There's a slew of topics that they have, and there's different people for all the different topics. So
that's neat.
But they're all, they're all fact-based. They're all heavily researched, and they're enjoyable to watch. So I really enjoy Crash Course as like if you want to learn something and want to learn a topic, it's in their bite size. So like you can watch it while eating lunch and then move on with your day and go do something else.
Cool. All right, I'll have to check that out.
Crash Course on YouTube.
And that's the thing too, is like that's the thing too, and like we again getting way off topic here, but this is what we do.
It's too late.
That's the nice thing about YouTube is that there are a lot of like bite-sized clips, right?
So the downside of YouTube though is the algorithm. This is a topic we should save for another day, but just to mention,
reach out there, right? Let's hold that off. But yeah, just anytime getting reach out and kind of promoting yourself, and
Right.
that's a whole different world than actually producing the videos.
So my last topic, I'm gonna spring this one on you. We're gonna end. I think every week we should end with a wrestling topic
Okay,
because I think it's just fun. Bring it back to things we
bring
know
it
and
back to
like
wrestling.
enjoy. Bring it back to wrestling every time. I even called the ending the finisher. So on my notes, I call it the
this is
finisher.
the finish. You gotta have a.
It's like go home, go home.
This is the finisher.
Yeah, we gotta get some sound effects or something. But this is my because I don't know if you watched AEW this week, but I did. What is your opinion, especially as a wrestling insider? I'll call you even.
I'm a wrestling influencer.
You're an insider.
I am an insider, technically.
You work on the amateur ring, so you know.
Independent.
Independent, not amateur. That's a whole other kind of wrestling.
That is a whole
independent
kind of
circuit. You are on the independent circuit.
I actually do get paid.
You get paid, so
might not be too much, but it is. I do get paid.
So we mentioned about how last week about how things that happen in Attitude Era cannot happen these days. My question, because we know so much more than we used to in the past, what's your take on blood in wrestling these days? I know that's a big one, huh?
It is a big one. Because I think it adds to a match. I think it got overused in the late 90s, in the Attitude Era, especially the ECW crowd. Because if you see it every night, it's not that big of a deal. I think back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, when it was used for dramatic effect. It was used to show something like really serious happened. Whereas, it got started to get used just because it looked cool, right? It was a cool visual.
The Crimson Mask.
It's not necessary. I think, you have to worry about, is there a risk of contagions? Are you worried about getting a disease from a bloody wrestler?
Well, I mean, I think
it's a weird look when the referees put gloves on when someone starts bleeding for real in wrestling now. That's something WWE started doing.
Right.
And I understand it, but
AEW does it as well.
Yeah. And I think, it probably has to do with OSHA, to be honest with you. There's probably some work.
Well, I mean, it's because you see it in MMA. They always have the gloves on.
Right. So that's my point.
Here's my question though.
Why not always wear the gloves, right? Why not?
Right.
If you're going to just put them on when someone bleeds, because it's just a weird look. I don't like it. I would either say don't put the gloves on or just always wear the gloves.
Right. Well, so I don't know this because I know from the MMA standpoint, like even on the amateur circuit of MMA, like you have to submit a blood test beforehand to show that you don't have HIV or things like that. Is that do wrestlers even on the independent circuit do the same thing?
No.
See that for me is cause for concern. Like, because if you're gonna spill blood with someone in the ring and you don't know if they have a disease,
you have to. There's a trust. I
mean, maybe in WWE they do. I don't know. In the bigger companies.
That's a good question. I don't even know if they do in the WWE or not, because they're all independent contractors technically.
I don't want to have to trust the person. Exclusive. It's like basically having unprotected sex with them.
Yeah.
You're changing body fluids
to a certain extent. Yeah.
I'm not getting someone pregnant, obviously, but
but no, to a certain extent, I guess you're right. So yeah, but no, it's not like we have to mandate blood tests or anything. You just kind of hope that the person's safe and isn't carrying any diseases, and if they would disclose that to you and
I hope so.
Not bleed in the ring.
I mean, for my take on it, I've definitely changed over the years. Where now, especially because we're so aware of things these days, like anytime I see someone blading, I'm like, come on, really, blade now still. Like,
well, that's the thing, right? Is it necessary?
Like, if you get busted open during the match, if you get busted open the hard way, as they say, fine, it's part of the match. You got busted open. You took a bump bad off the ring post or something, and now you're bleeding. I'm cool with that.
And it happens. It happens a lot.
And as long as you can, and the thing is, as especially as wrestling fans know, if you cut your forehead, you're going to bleed a lot, and it just looks bad, but it doesn't.
Well, that's why you do it.
But there's no health concerns with that because it's just the forehead. But
right. Another trick is to take an aspirin before or have a beer
no,
or
to thin
two
the
to
blood
try to
out.
thin the blood out a little bit so you bleed more.
Right.
It's a visual, right? Is it necessary? Like I've had people in the indies, you know, want to bleed in their matches. Um, it doesn't happen as much anymore, obviously, but I remember a few years back there was a guy, and he basically was like, you know, this is something I always wanted to try, so I'm going to do it. Like it was a big match of his coming up, and yeah, I think it was a blow off for a big feud or something. And he was like, you know, I've always wanted to do it, so I just want to try it, so I'm just going to do it. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, it's really not necessary. Like, you don't need to. He's like, no, I really, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, it's kind of like a wrestling, like, badge of honor, right? Like,
I guess so. Yeah.
I gigged.
I bled. I gave
And
it.
then as a referee, I always hated carrying around the blades for him. That always made me feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Because usually I'd have to, like, put a tape cut up razor in my pocket or something like that and try and pass it off to him.
Oh.
And that I always felt kind of like that was on me. Now I was like, if I lost it, I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. But I never did.
Now I'm responsible for the prop.
Or like passing it around, making that look convincing. You know,
right.
You know, that's always a trick. That's another magic trick. But
I suppose also because being on the indie circuit, it's not like you got cameras. You know, it's not like TV where everyone's looking at the hard cam or whatever. You know, you can cut away and not see what the ref's doing for a second. Being on an indie circuit where everyone's just round the ring closer and looking at everything, it's hard to
that probably makes it
do that
almost easier though, because you can like you know, there's ways to distract people and do it.
Yeah,
somebody else is distracted. Because if you notice, obviously in the olden days when they used to cut themselves,
the olden days,
you know, you would do it after a big bump, and then after the big bump, you know, your opponent would distract the crowd while you're doing it. Or the manager would distract the crowd while something's going on. So, because usually there's babyface getting blood, right? Because, you know, why would you feel sympathy for the heel?
Right.
So, you know, big bump happens, blah, blah, blah.
Good point on that one.
And then the heel can do his or her thing, or the, you know,
their thing,
showing off to the crowd, get the crowd's focus on them, so then you can take care of your business.
If we use neutral pronouns, we'll just call them their crowd.
Well, that's, you know, that's an important thing. Is like I'm big on gender as a social construct. Like I'm big on that. It's we gotta start thinking about gender differently. But that's getting off topic again. We can go back to
in that case. Well, you know what? We'll save that for next week because then we'll just talk about Sunny Kiss for an hour.
Yeah, sure.
Well, not for an hour. We can use that as a segment because.
Well, we might have a debate to talk about. I was hoping we'd have another debate to talk about.
Well, we could have a town hall meeting though, because Biden said he'll have a town hall even if there's no debate, and it's already set up. ABC said they'll do it.
So yeah, so we'll have something to talk. We'll always have something to talk about. This is going to be an interesting month.
Oh my God, hopefully we make it to December as a country.
Well, as a world.
Yeah.
But.
Well, I think that's a good spot. I mean, I'm glad. Thanks for your inputs on the blood and wrestling. I was curious about that because it just came up in my head the other day because I was watching this week's AEW and they had a dog collar match, which I was like, really, we're doing this? Do we need to?
Gimmicks are gimmicks. I know. Something to do.
And they both were bloody as hell. And different.
What's the thing? Like, I think, you know, they're trying to bring back a little of that old school mentality. That little. They are. But they too. Like you said, you use it to get something over, right? You use it to make it special, make it important.
Right? It was for their TV championship. Come on.
Well, I know that might be important to them. I mean, you think about the iconic Stone Cold and the sharpshooter bleeding, like blood
passing out.
Like yeah. And then, that kind of led to that. So you use it like that in a story, and it looks dramatic, and it's effective. I just think it got to the point where everyone was just doing it to do it, and it kind of took away from the importance of it. So, and like you said, there's definitely concerns about, you know, bloodborne pathogens and diseases. So that was a big issue. So that's one of the reasons they got rid of it, and people will live without it. I mean, it's not like something that's necessary for wrestling to exist.
Well, I mean, the WWE got rid of it for a while because, you know, they wanted to be the PG rating. So they had to get rid of it because Linda was running for office.
Well, that was another big thing where they went to the more family friendly. That and let's be honest, it's an economic decision as well. Like
Oh yeah,
it's a lot easier to get sponsors when you're working
family friendly.
when you're family friendly and you're advertising to kids instead of teenagers. You know,
It doesn't hurt that you're, you know, Triple H and Stephanie had a kid at the time too. You know, so
right. I mean, you just look at the sponsors that the WWEF had during the Attitude Era. Like it was what Stridex pads and motor
Slim
oil
Jim
basically every week.
Slim Jim.
Sounds, of course, always the Slim Jims. You gotta have
And Subway. Subway has been a sponsor for a long time. Eat fresh.
Have they?
I don't know. I feel like they've always been a sponsor. And, you know, Snickers has been in there.
I think Subway just sponsors everything. I think they just
Well, yeah, child pedophile. Oh, I mean,
hey, Jared, poor Jared.
Oh,
Poor Jared.
That's another subject. I spent a day in New York with Jared once, so I can talk about that another time.
Oh no way! You met Jared. Jared.
I worked for Subway headquarters for a very short time, and we had a day in New York. That's a whole nother. Let's save that.
That's saving that for another.
Yeah, we're saving that.
Topic.
We'll save that, Jem. I think I can freely talk about that now because he's in trouble and they no longer pay him and money. So.
Yes, no, you can talk. Oh, was oh yeah, let's.
Oh no, I never signed anything, but I just felt like
No.
I just felt like it would not be the right thing for me to do to like talk about him at the time, even though I wasn't working for them anymore. Just it was the right thing to do. Now he's a jerk and it's open game.
Yeah,
it's hunting season.
That's a great episode. The Dirt on Jared. Yes.
Well, I think this is a good time to end it. I want to thank everyone for listening this week. If you like what you hear, please tell a friend, write a comment, give us a rating, post it on the social medias. It will help us out to get the word out there and talk about our ideas. And please, if you have ideas and comments for future episodes, drop us an email at gzenial@gmail.com. That's gzenial@gmail.com. I'll have the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening.
All right, thanks, guys. Take care.